I'm going to stand up. I feel a bit better speaking when I'm standing up. So I don't want to be here. It's not because you're not nice people. It's not because I don't like speaking in public, because I actually quite enjoy it. I'm a bit sick, but there you go. It's because I never thought at the age of 58 I'd be having to stand up and defend the rights of women and gay people in this progressive country. How the hell did it get to this? Where did it come from? I've only really been aware of this for about 4 years. Before that, I was a fairly benign trans ally. But in 4 years, I've gone from being a liberal, left-leaning, lesbian feminist to being a bitch, a Nazi, a Tesla. That last one was C-U-N-T, cunt. How have we got to the situation in this democratic country where academic institutions are capitulating to fascist bully boys, bullying people out of their jobs, bullying people off platforms and making really good women shut up? This is wrong and we've all got to speak out against it. I was interviewed today for a news programme called The Nine. It was supposed to be about prisons, but they managed to drag me into lots of other areas as well. It'll be screened in a couple of weeks. And one of the things that they made me talk about, that's dreadful, thumbs, cruise, but I was talking about my experience of growing up gay. And growing up as what was called in those days a tomboy. So I played football, I wanted football boots for my birthday. A lot of my friends were boys. I hated... I would have been seen dead in pink. I absolutely am much more liberal, so I can wear pink quite happily. And I never wore skirts. My mum despaired of me. I was covered in bruises. I fell off my bike umpteen times. I used to batter people. Anyway, just shocking behaviour. But I have no doubt that if I was growing up now on social media and listening to the utter pish that organisations like Mermaids come out with, I would be being trans. I have no doubt about that, and that will be a common experience for many of the people in this room, gay or straight, and this is terrifying. So, 10 years ago I joined the Scottish Prison Service. I went straight in as Deputy Governor of Berlin. I know. I was glad my mum was dead because she'd have died if she'd seen me. So I joined the Scottish Prison Service, and during the first 5 years that I was in the Scottish Prison Service, I met or was aware of 2 trans women, 2, and they weren't even both in at the same time. When I left the Scottish Prison Service last year, there were 22. 22. Not all of them in the women's estate. Over that whole same 10 years, I was only ever aware of 1 trans man in the estate. There was absolutely no question that that person would ever be accommodated with men, because there was an implicit understanding that that would put them at risk. There was no understanding and no consideration that it would put women at risk to put trans women in beside them. So there's this just denial going on. There's an acceptance that men are dangerous to women, but there's not an acceptance that those same men are dangerous to women when you put them in beside them. I don't know if any of you have experience of prisons, but perhaps some people have been in prison, perhaps people know folk who've been in prison. But one of the first horrific things that happen in prison is a horrific, dehumanising, nasty experience, even though there are nice people that we try to make it better. There are lots of great people in the prison service, but just the whole process is dehumanising and re-traumatising for already traumatised women. More than 80% of women in prison have had horrendously chaotic lives, usually at the hands of men. They've been abused when they were kids by their dads. They've been prostituted out, and not sex workers, don't give me that piss either. Prostituted out as young girls. They've been used and abused by every man they've ever been with, and many of them have never had a decent man in their lives. And what's one of the first things we do to people when they come into prison? We strip search them. Now, I'm a survivor of abuse myself. Bad enough to be strip searched by a woman. Can you imagine a woman being strip searched by a trans officer? Now, that's not happened yet, but it's coming. That is one of the logical conclusions down the road if this Gender Recognition Act goes ahead. So you're strip searched and then you get carted along to some hall where you're going to spend the rest of your time. And perhaps the first other prisoner that you face is someone who you think, oh, whoa, wait, that's a man. And you say to the officers, that's a man. No, it's not. That's a woman. No, it's a woman. This is the ridiculous carry-on we're putting people through. And let me tell you that I have a lot of sympathy for people who are so uncomfortable in their own skin that they think they can change into the skin of someone else. And we should all have sympathy for anyone who's going through that kind of mental distress because they need help. But women don't need to accommodate them to make them feel better. Trans women is not a subset of women, it's a subset of man. And the sooner we make that clear, the better. So despite all of that, people ask me if it's problematic, how can you even ask that, to have trans women in women's prisons. It is never not a problem to have them in women's prisons. Now, I'm not suggesting for a minute that all trans women are sexual predators or nasty people. I've actually met a couple of them who you'd probably quite like if you met outside, apart from the fact they're murderers. But really, I mean, you meet a lot of people in prison, and it's circumstance that they've done horrible things, but probably if I had had their life and was in that situation, I would have done the same, so I would never condemn anyone. So they're okay people, some of them aren't. But that's not the point. The fact is that harm doesn't have to be physical to harm people. There is scant regard for the emotional well-being of women in prison in lots of ways, and this is just the icing on the cake, the way we're treating women. So most of the trans women that I've met as well in prison were not trans before they came in. They haven't lived as trans people. Now we've got a Gender Recognition Act proposed that will allow them to change their birth certificate, their everything about them after 3 months of saying, that was 5, wasn't it? 3 months of saying they're trans. How outrageous is that? And make no mistake about this, people in prison will do it for nefarious reasons. It would be ludicrous to think that they'll all be doing it for genuine reasons. Some of them may be doing it for genuine reasons, whatever genuine means in that context. Some of the things that I witnessed when I was using the term working loosely, because of course governors don't actually work, fanny about pointing at things. Some of the things that I was aware of when I was the governor was completely inappropriate sexual behaviour from trans women, doing it to wind women up. So a trans woman on the phone to their partner outside, talking really loudly about what they were going to do to them sexually with their penis when they get out. A trans woman who walked about in tight leggings with an obvious erection to the obvious discomfort of the women around them. A trans woman who decided that they were male and demanded to be moved back to the male estate when we didn't do it quick enough, threatened to rape the female prisoners and staff. And then when they got back to the male estate, they decided they were female again. And that brings me to the other point. What on earth are we going to do with non-binary people in the prison service? Seriously, I mean, I know we're laughing because it's ludicrous. What are we going to do with them? Where are we going to put them? And what about gender fluid people? People whose identity can change from day to day, hour to hour, minute to minute. How on earth are we going to cope with that? What are we going to call them on the records for a start? How are we going to record their sex or gender? And it will be sex if this act goes ahead. How are we going to cope with people like that? I think the only solution for us is to have a trans unit in the Scottish Prison Service. But even then, that could be problematic because you still can't put trans men in with trans women. Now, I think the Scottish Prison Service is already on really dodgy legal ground with what they're doing now. Section 126 of the rules that govern everything the Scottish Prison Service does says that females must be held in separate accommodation to males. I think the Scottish Prison Service are already breaking the law. Why are they doing it? Well, they're doing it for the same reason that probably all of you were really generous towards trans people before you started to open your eyes to what it actually meant. People want to be progressive, they want to be good, they want to be kind, they want to include marginalised people. We all do that. And that's why we've got to where we are today. People are also afraid to speak up. I have met very, very few staff in the Scottish Prison Service who think this is okay. But A, they're civil servants and they can't speak out publicly, and that's why I couldn't speak out before I left the service. And B, they know that it would go against them at work, because this has now been included in the equality and diversity courses, and there's a load of old rubbish talked on them as well. I've had several reasons for being uncomfortable with equality and diversity sessions for a while, and actually I blame people like me, gay people, feminists, for allowing some right old garbage to be included in that. I mean, the idea that harassment and discrimination is whatever you perceive it to be, this is nonsense. We need objective standards. I don't consider myself a phobe of any kind, not a transphobe, certainly not a transphobe. But the minute you express the sentiment, for example, that you can't literally become a woman, it gets you chucked off Twitter, as happened to me. It gets people calling your employers to try and get you disciplined. And suddenly you become that Nazi bigot TERF cunt person again. And it's just gone too far. I want to say a word about the staff again as well, because staff don't want to be strip searching people that they know are the opposite sex. Men don't want to strip search women. Women don't want to strip search men, but they're going to be forced to do it on pain of discipline or dismissal. They're already, this prison service is already not supporting staff who refuse to do it. But at the moment, they're still on dodgy legal ground. The prison service also has a traditional issue with recruiting black, Asian and minority ethnic staff. Now, a lot of people from those groups come from traditionally conservative religious groups. They will not come into the prison service and represent our population as we should. If you've got, for example, Muslim women having to strip search people who are clearly physically male. One more word about the sort of extremism that is going on around this whole debate. It seems to me that there's a rush by trans rights activists to try and dismiss our concerns as being right-wing. And it's unfortunate, I think, that there are a lot of right-wing people speaking out against transgenderism, and we must resist that at all costs. However, I would rather be allied with them than Iran and Pakistan. In Iran and Pakistan, it is illegal to be gay. In fact, it's punishable by death, but the state will pay for you to transition. So please just remember to say that to people when they accuse you of being right-wing. I fear for the future of the Scottish Prison Service if this legislation goes ahead. And I hope after hearing me tonight you'll support any attempts to stop the Gender Recognition Act. Because if the meaning of woman is eroded in law, we will not be able to hold any transgender woman back from going to the women's estate. At the moment, the Scottish Prison Service does, so it holds back people who have an overt history of violence or sexual violence against women in their recent past. There are still people there who have it further back in their past, but they stop them if it's recent or if it's overt or if they're actually making threats to women. If in law these people are women, they will not be able to stop them being accommodated there. And here is a prediction I will make. At some point in the future, because we are getting better at keeping women out of prison, we're not nearly good enough yet, we need to do better. At some point in the future, there will be more trans women in women's prisons than actual natal women. Because that's the way it's going. A 4,000% increase in girls presenting at the Tavistock Clinic over these last years. This is horrific. But they tend not to come into prison, but there will be more trans women in women's prisons than there are women. I loved working for the Scottish Prison Service. It was a fabulous job, and I'm really grateful that I did it. And I'm also really grateful that it's given me the experience and the knowledge to speak up on platforms like this. Thank you for listening. There's about 380 at the moment, so the trans population is about 7% of the actual female population, although they're not all in the women's estate at the moment, but it's about 7% across the estate declaring themselves to be women, and that's way out of proportion to the incidence in the general population. About 7 times at least the incidence in the general population, so don't tell me they're genuinely trans, because they're not.
Thank you.